Welcome back to Third Shift. Today we're going to be talking about the differences between Marco Polo, the new series from Netflix, versus Game of Thrones, iconic one.
Let's start off by discussing this one thing. About a week or two ago, Netflix's CEO went out into the media and told people that this is their competitor for Game of Thrones.
Correct.
That means a lot.
Just right off the bat, I'm saying that for a reason because I don't want anybody coming back to me in the comments and saying, "Hey, they're not trying to be Game of Thrones. They're not trying to fight them.
Right.
You shouldn't compare the two."
What he meant was they made a show that was like Game of Thrones in that it was a show that you could watch on your TV.
So here's the thing.
That's true. They wasn't him saying it was going to be.
Yeah. So
I just want to again. Let's. They might get beat up on it.
I got you.
Let's not make anybody.
Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is an iconic television series. It is one that will go from now until when we're 90 years old, and everyone will be talking about it. The thing with Marco Polo is it was a ambitious try to capitalize on that type of genre, that type of legendary feel.
First of all, here's your spoiler alert. We are going to be talking about a lot of things that went on in the first episode for sure, and a couple of things that might have happened in subsequent episodes. This is mostly focused around the series itself. It's mostly focused around the first episode, and we're not going to shy away from discussing any particular aspect of it. If you haven't seen the Marco Polo series from Netflix yet, I highly recommend seeing it before you see this review. If you're looking for a short answer, we're not going to give you one. Netflix has done a lot of hard work. They honestly deserve for you to go see it. Highly recommend that you at least watch the first episode and that you're not surprised about the spoilers that we're going to discuss in the show. Now,
we should also probably point out that we may be spoiling a few things in Game of Thrones.
If you haven't
but
watched
honestly, it's been 8 months, so if you haven't watched the rest of Game of Thrones, come out of your cave and the rest of society.
True. If you
I have friends in China who've seen the last episode, so seriously, you're done.
Well, they usually see them first.
Touche. Right?
I would just say, if you haven't seen Game of Thrones, it is now part of common popular culture. If you haven't seen it and you're worried about not being caught up, you should probably watch that first. It will help you understand a bit more about why we feel the way we do about Marco Polo.
Honestly, Jay Leno was doing jokes about the last episode, so it's way too late now if you haven't seen it.
Basically,
because he's on our TV anymore.
So
that was a joke.
The thing about Marco Polo is that
let's talk about the production first.
Here's the thing. It is if you look at the dramatic scenery in Game of Thrones, it is striking. It is something that pulls you into the story and pulls you into the world. When you compare that to the scenery in Marco Polo, it has a very, very similar draw. Albeit the draw is a little bit more grittier. It's not as engaging.
Well, I won't even try to hide. I didn't like Marco Polo, but I think the thing I did like about it is, and it's something Raimi said earlier, you could tell Netflix had a very high level, production level that they were going for, and you could see it. You know, I was fortunate enough to be able to go to Beijing and see the Great Wall and see the Forbidden City, and so there are a lot of scenes that they have that, you know, they had to build these gigantic sets.
This is what I'm saying.
That are just spectacular.
Correct. They
so
draw you
much
in
detail.
with it, but there's some grittiness to it because it
feels
like you're on a set.
Yes, and even in that first moment, in that first scene where they're in the village and they get attacked.
Correct.
Even in that first moment, it's so real.
Yes.
It's so lifelike.
You feel like
and you're in this feudal
era,
feudal
China, feudal Mongolia,
and it's really, that to me was spectacular. And the costumes.
The costumes are spot on.
Amazing.
They're spot on.
Amazing.
And I'm a medieval buff. You know how I am. And it actually does a lot of the costuming they pulled. It is very reminiscent of that time period, which is something I was like, oh my gosh, they actually spent time on it. However, there's a gritty feel. It feels like you are outside of the actual action, and it does look like you're looking into a box.
And I really like how that's really, really well contrasted. Just talking about the production level and that gritty feeling, it's really well contrasted between China and Venice. When we go to Venice,
Correct.
when we see Venice,
Correct.
it's this beautiful.
Yes,
if you've been to Venice in the past few years, it looks a very different. This is a very new and clean Venice,
Correct.
and it's so
Yes.
different from what you see in the China shots that are a lot in a lot of ways a lot darker and a lot. I like the term gritty. That's a really good way to say it. It's very, very well done. I think
here's my
best
thought
thing.
on it is they according to Forbes, Netflix spent around $90 million for this 10 episode season, not series. If you contrast that to about the $6 million per episode average that Game of Thrones spends, that is a pretty significant jump, going to $9 million per episode. And the reason why I bring it up is because I don't feel that they got more out of it than I don't feel they stretched their dollar as far as maybe
I think the biggest thing why they had to spend so much is because they needed to actually try to do. They don't have the rule book. They don't have the playbook that HBO has. So they had to make their own rule book, and that's a whole thing. Yeah, the story, that's why I believe they spent more money.
I would also
they needed to find something.
Well,
would
Game of
also
Thrones did not make their own rule book.
No. Game of Thrones had their own story already.
Yeah,
there was
something.
an anthology.
Actually,
of books
as
that Game of
a
Thrones
side
had.
point, I think that is part of the reason why this failed.
Well,
This is-
so
I
so
agree.
wait, before we get that far,
Yeah.
I think I wanted to go on another note because we're talking 6 versus 9, and I think the real reality of that, most of that money wasn't spent on the story. The writers didn't make that money. But I think okay,
Writer,
yeah. But I think the big thing that happened there really was when we're going back and talking about these great sets. These are some and Game of Thrones have massive sets. The throne room in Game of Thrones.
Yep.
I think they talked about that on the DVD set
Yep.
where it's this huge thing.
Yep.
So, but I think when you look at the build up to Game of Thrones, I think that getting that real feeling of this is what real world feudal China looked like, I think they really capture that, and I don't think that's an easy thing to do.
I think that's why they spent the money that they did, because they tried. Because I think the biggest issue that they probably ran into was, we know what it looks like. We know we can recreate this, but can we get that feel? Like, can we get the carts and the goats going by and all other stuff?
And especially today
that's
to
yeah,
make that happen.
exactly.
I think I can
Modern day.
see where you would need to spend more money on that.
I
I
feel-
think that paid off. I think that bet and putting more money on that paid off. It's just
The storyline.
nothing happened.
Well,
Can we talk about the storyline?
Well, before we
storyline?
jump into that, let me just say this one
That
last
is
thing about production. So the reason why I brought up the $6 to $9 million is because the reality is that I felt Game of Thrones as a whole used their resources better in this at least a couple of senses. I felt production was actually awesome. I think you felt like you're in China. You felt like you're in Venice.
Correct.
I also felt that there were a lot of times where they were doing things that seemed to waste money. Like they have these sweeping kind of vista shots on helicopters in the desert where there's, you see the specks of the caravan out in the sand.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
And it was like one of those shots. Their thing is they're interesting shots. I wouldn't call them beautiful in the sense that I consider Game of Thrones cinematography beautiful.
And this is what I was saying earlier.
But it was just like, okay, we saw it. Did we need to?
That's what I was saying
But I
before.
think those are two separate conversations, though. In my feeling,
they are.
because like one from it's Brokeback Mountain. When I first saw that film, the first thing I thought was, wow, Ang Lee made this gorgeous film in the middle of America that no one even thought of before. And it's just these spanning shots of mountains and countryside, and it's all gorgeous. But but then there's that other thing that made the film great is it had this really good story that was driving it along.
Correct.
And I think that's kind of where we get lost in the field with Marco Polo.
So then, can we talk about this guy? It's the elephant in the room, the storyline. Now, if you guys know about Marco Polo and his exploits and his personal mission that he went on, it is dramatic. Don't go into watching this thinking that you're going to get some minor historical recreation of it. It's not going to happen. They went off the rails the first 3 minutes in the movie. And the problem is they don't even acknowledge. Unfortunately, I wish they had some little blurb saying that there are periods of Marco Polo's adventures that are unrecorded, and he was a government official and all this other good stuff. But the way that they build it up into this series, it is not there. It is they went a totally different direction, and it's kind of hard to follow it because you don't know where they're going to go with it because it doesn't make sense from the very, very beginning.
I don't think they give us
very few seconds into meeting the Kubokan, it doesn't jive with his actual what he went through.
I think the big thing that happens with the story, because I agree that there's a lot of that, but I think the big problem is the understanding of pacing. Because when you look at Game of Thrones, and we're again versus Game of Thrones, when you look at Game of Thrones, George R.R. Martin was very clear about pacing when he wrote the story,
right.
And the production team for Game of Thrones understood that. And so the first episode, a lot happens.
Right.
You meet like 20 different characters
right.
who are all major characters,
right.
and then there are the other minor characters that are really important, that become more important later on in the story. You meet all of this, but it's not just them shoving a character in front of you and telling you, this is this person, remember his face, we'll talk about him in 2 years.
Right.
There's action happening, something's going on,
right.
and at the end of that first episode, you're like, wow, I wonder what's going to happen next.
You know, as an example of what we're talking about, in the first episode, and God help me if I'm wrong, because I'm sure somebody's going to eat me alive on that. In the first episode, we meet the king. We meet the entire Stark family.
Yep.
Bran Stark gets shoved out of a window. We find out there's incest going on between the queen and
her brother.
Her brother. Joffrey gets slapped by Tyrion. All this happens in the first episode.
Yeah.
And I look at that, and then I'm like, I know you guys have only seen the first episode really so far. I couldn't believe what Netflix was able to do with this, or not able to do with it, especially given the budget. So I watched the next 4 episodes. I'm up to episode 5, and it honestly gets worse. It gets worse and worse and worse.
I think the problem is too is there seems to be, at least from my perspective, it seems to be that they wanted to play in this gray area of Marco Polo's life.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And playing in this gray area meant that they're still tied to these other things that he does later.
Yes.
So what are you going to do with the character? There's no threat of death. Mm-hmm. There's no threat of him getting married. There's no threat of him having a child. There's nothing major that can happen to him. So basically, and that's what it felt like the first episode felt to me. This character starts here and has to stay here, because if we move him here, well, everyone's going to go, well, that's not what happened.
Yeah. Well, now that's why I was saying earlier about this is why it tore at me, because you have this character, and not this character, it's an individual, real life individual that we have chronicled. We have documentations of where he's been. He opened the freaking stuff. We have documentation of this. In this series that they open up, they literally say, we don't care about all this canon that is out there. We're gonna dump it and give you something that is completely. I'll be frank. It's minute. It's crap. It's literally thrown away.
It's irrelevant. Yeah.
So the problem is that it could have been fixed by them staying kind of following those milestones in his life that he marked out in his books and in a lot of his writings.
Or
that's where and then all that gray area they could have talked around, love affairs, having legitimate children. You could have all that kind of stuff in there. But they did. They said we're not gonna bother with what he actually did. We're gonna rewrite this whole series.
I think though, like, I don't even feel that, because if you look at, I don't know if you guys saw Da Vinci's Demons, Stars.
Yes. Yeah.
I watched it. I have a big problem with that show, but it's something different. But at least with Da Vinci's Demons, they said, we're going to explore what happened, because there's a whole lot of Da Vinci's life we don't know. We're going to fill in those holes. Right. And they do. And they do things. There are things that happen that we know factually, just his sexuality, we know factually, or is not the way the show portrays it. Right. But they go with what they're doing because they're telling a compelling story. Yeah. And the story has to move on.
But they meet milestones. This is the thing I was trying to get to. They do meet milestones. They're saying, you know what? He had done this at this age, at this time. Here, we're going to show you how we visioned that happened, along with the story that we're telling into the gray area. There's none of that. This is why I was saying that the whole leading up to Kubokan it was a slap in the face to anyone who's a historical. Even if you want to suspend your disbelief, it's still a slap in the face. The whole concept.
I think the biggest thing that they screwed up on, there's two big things, and this is in their development of this program. One is that they went with a non-existent story. They built their own story, custom for this. And the reason why that's a problem is because you think about how long George R.R. Martin spent making Game of Thrones.
Oh, Lord help me.
It's not like he had a year to write Game of Thrones.
Correct.
He had
20 years.
Yeah, he's had decades to mess with this. It's a rich story because he's had time to devote time to it. And so I think, and he's already an excellent writer, so there's already just a natural depth that will happen because of that.
Lord help me, don't die.
But the other thing is when you pick a single character,
I need winners. Who? I need winners. Winners.
Don't do this. We
no,
don't need George R. R. Martin.
no. Oh,
saying our show was terrible.
That's his last. No, that's his last kill. He's going to kill himself. And actually, as you bring that point up, I think the other big mistake they made is
Mr. Martin.
We love you.
I love you.
We still want you here. Please finish the book.
Hey,
I think.
Please finish the book.
I think you're gonna have a long life, and there's no worry of you dying.
But finish the book.
These assholes, however.
I dare.
Finish the book.
Jesus.
I'm out of cliffhanger.
So
right here.
check it out. What I'm saying, the second thing is that the thing that makes Game of Thrones unpredictable is that there are no golden gooses.
Correct.
There's nobody that can't die.
Correct.
Yeah,
and honestly, you don't really get that until the end of the first season, and then you're like, holy shit, everybody's head is on the board. Nobody's off limits.
I think very clearly Martin telegraphs what happens.
Yeah, you know it might be coming, but even when it's about to happen, you're like, bullshit. Bullshit, nobody's gonna do this. What's gonna happen?
I think very early in the first book, he very clearly he throws Bran out of windows.
Yes, in the books.
We're like, so you just
killed
but
at that point, Bran's a minor character at that point.
But no, he's not.
Minor enough. Minor enough.
Bran
he's not the head of the Stark family.
Before that happens, he has a chapter with his name on it from his perspective.
That's fine, but my point is,
he's not necessarily
after that point in the story, and I'm talking about the show after the end of the first season. We now understand something that Martin is trying to tell us, which is that this is not a story about a person.
Yes,
this is a story about this story.
Correct.
Right? And I think that in Marco Polo, by nature, there's no way for us to think anything like that.
Yes.
Because it's literally got Marco Polo on the title.
Yes.
They can't kill him.
Yeah.
There's nothing that can happen to this guy that's of any consequence.
Correct.
Although
they can't kill the Khan. They can't kill.
There are other shows who have tried to kill their main character, and even this month, who've tried to kill the main character, but it still always feels kind of weak. So I'm not a believer that killing your main character is the best way to advance the story.
I'm not saying it is.
Martin does it well because he knew going in, this is going to be a much bigger story than Ned Stark. So fuck Ned Stark. But I think he even gives us wonderful cathartic moments with Joffrey and other people who when it happens you're just salivating because thank God.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I don't know that Marco Polo needs. I don't know that in the show he needs to die. I honestly don't know that there needs to be the threat of death. I think the big problem is there is no risk involved.
Okay,
the story doesn't do anything. It spins its wheels, especially the first episode. It spins its wheels for an hour, and at the end of the hour, you're like, I could have been watching porn.
Yeah. So here's the thing about this. You hit the nail. Marco Polo. The only things you can compare between Marco Polo and Game of Thrones, these series, is sex, violence, and their landscape. And on those three areas, the sex is woeful. It is completely lackluster.
Holy shit!
And then wait. The thing with the sex is that it's not. It feels horrifyingly forced.
I'm sorry.
It is feels as if someone had.
I don't even remember someone having sex.
First of all,
oh wait, there was the one chick.
Folks,
with the old guy. That was it. There's one chick with an old guy.
Wait, no. If you want
worst porn
to
ever.
Watch Kublai Khan, who is the ugliest bastard in the show.
Thank you.
Get laid multiple times. This is the show for you.
That's why.
If you got an ugly fetish, you're on.
Oh, okay. I guess I only saw the first episode, so it's one time.
And honestly, listen.
But there
I will say
tits and acts.
No, but there's no attractive men in this show.
That's right.
I disagree.
The main character looks
like
a
resident
noob.
gay has spoken.
Wait, who?
He looks like a noob.
Who?
What are you talking about? Are you people? He is fucking
who?
fucked. Who do you think? Marco Polo. He fucking takes his shirt off. Jesus Christ, I almost died. So yeah, they hit that nail on the head. Well done.
Listen, well,
but even his freaking the blind teacher, he's cute too. There were
The blind teacher's badass. I got mad.
Oh, the
He's badass.
He's one
Kublai
of my
Khan's
favorite
son.
characters.
Yeah, he's my favorite character.
Kublai Khan's son's hot. Like there were a lot of
that's
very
okay,
attractive
yes,
men.
that's
And
true.
I think
But they're
what I
white.
like,
Wait.
what I really like about it is and this is one of the things that made me so mad that the story wasn't there is. We don't get a lot of Asian actors on TV.
This is
and
the truth.
There are so many wonderful Asian actors in the show, like Kublai Khan, his son, oh my gosh, with the other cities.
By the way, now we come to the thing that pissed me, that after watching more than one episode, really pissed me off. And I don't know why, it's never really been one of those things that bugs the shit out of me, but now it bugs the shit out of me. This entire show goes on, first of all, nobody in the show at any point speaks Chinese.
Oh my god, I was asking about this earlier. Remember at the
Nobody
beginning? I was like, can we get a translator?
So-
I thought that was nice.
Everything's, wait.
No, I thought that was a nice little thing. That
It's
they're going to start
interesting.
talking
That's what I
in
thought.
their language. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Give me some translation for God's
Nothing,
sakes.
right. But wait, here's the thing. Not as far as I
And
can
they're just-
remember.
they're
Do you guys
all
remember
English.
any Chinese being spoken?
They do at the
They- at
very
the beginning.
beginning.
The
And
very
at
beginning,
very
that's
first
it.
scene. That's it.
That's
Fine.
it.
They speak a little bit. But then the thing that kills me is that we've got 2 or 3, maybe 4 different English dialects going on.
Okay, I was
You got
so
you got
on
like
it.
3 or 4 different regions in Great Britain or in the UK that they're talking about that you hear high British, you hear low kind of guttural British, you hear English accents,
There was
you
no
hear
consistency.
American accents.
to who was speaking and how.
And then,
why.
if you notice, in the first episode, you hear Marco Polo speak with a really heavy Italian accent,
and then
he loses it entirely.
Yes.
And it
And-
will go
and-
from scene to scene with him switching.
So I think.
Wait, so I
actually,
asked a question.
think
I got
something
one
happened.
thing.
Well,
In the very beginning, when Marco Polo is describing Kublai Khan's kingdom, I want you guys to step back for a second. This guy had 3 years to learn this dialect of Chinese, and he had enough wherewithal to give a picturesque view of it that allows Kublai Khan to allow him to become a manservant. I don't know if anyone in this entire planet would have that kind of visceral knowledge to do that. That's why everything went off the rails. It literally went off the rails. I'm like, because you're basically talking about languages. In this movie, his entire anthologue is about language, about trade, about measurements, about diplomacy. That's Marco Polo. That's who you think of as Marco Polo. This, I don't know what the heck I'm watching.
So I
literally stopped after he starts talking in English to a Chinese Mongolian Khan, and you're thinking, no, this is not how this works.
I think, as far as the language goes, because one, I want to go back and I want to be very clear. I think the acting is really, really great. But
wait.
I
What?
think the acting is really, really great. The actors
Bullshit.
portray their
wow.
characters
Really
Wow.
in a way that
No, the only person
Okay,
I would say is
I'll
really
say this.
good
Let me-
is the guy.
I'm not going to
waltzing.
blame the actors. All I would say is this: the dialogue is awful.
The dialogue is
It
awful.
is awful,
So-
and it drags everybody down.
It drags
let
everything down.
me go back. I think the actors did a very good job being believable. That is their job, being believable. Everything you're talking about, that's the writer's fault.
Maybe.
The
I'm
actor
not
is not
maybe.
responsible for what he's saying.
I think
he's
the writer
responsible for
screwed
making
up.
me believe that what he's saying is something that the character.
I
is
agree
saying.
with you. I think the writer screwed up, and there was a lot of times when I was like, actually, if you pay close attention to what Kublai Khan has to say and what he's usually talking about, he comes off like the most insecure Mongol warlord
ever.
that ever existed.
Exactly.
Because he's constantly asking what the Europeans, what the West thinks of him. What do they think of China? What is it's like, what do you guys think of us? And I'm thinking to myself, this is a guy that's every other word, he's like, I own the world.
Correct.
Tell me how my desert looks.
Right.
And it's just like, you're like, well, come on, man. At least, I just kind of wanted to hug him. I'm like, dude, you got it. You got it. You're a big old bear with claws. With these claws, you can't do anything.
I actually took that a different way. I think him asking Marco Polo that question was for a completely different reason.
It wasn't
and
once.
I think,
like I said, I did more than once. He does it throughout the series as far as I've seen it.
He's doing it. I haven't seen it to completion, but I would hope that they're smart enough to do it for the reason that I think they're doing it for, which is control. That is an aspect of control.
My assessment would have been, if you're dealing with a Mongol warlord, anytime you get in a disagreement with him, you are in deep shit. You're about to die. Maybe you should work it out with him.
He's not asking that. What he's asking is it's control. He's saying, I know I own the world. In one of the
he never sounds like that. That's what I'm saying.
The second time he asks him about, I think one of the cities or something. And the scene before that, he just had a fight with his family about whether or not he was ruling Mongol or China, and he goes, "Fuck China, fuck Mongol. I want the world." And then he brings Marco Polo in, and he tells him to describe the city. Now, do you think Kublai Khan had seen that city? Of course he'd seen that city.
But wait,
he fucking conquered the city.
Wait, here's the thing.
The reason he asked...
Not necessarily.
No, he had not. Okay, he had not done
the
it.
reason he asked...
Father.
The reason he asked was he wanted Marco Polo to feel small because he wanted Marco Polo to think that what he's describing is this big, visceral thing, and it's a dot on the map on the floor. Like, if the writing is really good, that's how you end that, because Kublai Khan is this huge fucking guy.
Can I make one small strategic
literally and
military point that there's a map on the fucking floor.
Yeah,
oh,
right?
gosh.
It's not quite clear why this map is laid out in the way it is, but the only major highlight on this map is the one city they have not conquered, right? And the one village that is supplying this city they haven't conquered. And the thing to me that's crazy is it's literally not on the floor, it's fucking built into the floor.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
At a certain point, Kublai Khan is talking about this city that's providing all the food for this village or farming community that's providing all the food and the farming for this walled city that they can't siege. And he has to describe that fact, but it's on the floor. It's like everybody in this room has obviously seen it. Yeah, it's the only thing on the map that's of any consequence.
Yeah, just cut off the city.
We've already said the writing isn't very...
And the thing that's hilarious to me is, it's so stupid about it is, maybe this is exactly how the histories go, but it's dumb to me because they're sitting there going, well, we should take the farming community and starve them out. And it's like, well, yeah, 3-year-olds could have told you that. And then they go try to do it, and they fail.
I know, right?
And I'm like, what kind of Mongols are these?
It really is. It really is
bad.
amazing. And going back to the language thing, because I think the language thing was the thing that annoyed me the most about more than anything.
Correct.
And as someone who's studied acting and who's done language, it's one of the reasons why, on the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit films, Philippa Boyens, she is a linguist. She has a lot of skills.
By the way, side note, Game of Thrones has a linguist too.
They made new languages.
Let me get
they
there.
They made new languages.
Let me get there. But for Peter Jackson brought in a team of people to work just on the way everyone says things. Hobbits speak a certain way. Yes. Hobbits from a specific part of Hobbiton speak a certain way. And it's different than Bilbo and Frodo because they are hobbits that are very different from everyone else around him. The reason why Sam speaks the way he does and so different from Frodo is because Frodo's from money and Sam is not. Sam's a low, and it's supposed to be that way. And it's just in the language. It says so much. And they miss this because you go into Game of Thrones and it's the same way.
Very. You feel it. You feel it.
I remember Jason Momoa.
She has slaves.
Jason Momoa talking.
This fool's basically berating her in a language that she knows.
Agreed.
And
Paul Drogo is a perfect example.
Yeah,
because
Jason Momoa.
If it wasn't for that, absolute just badass language.
Oh my gosh,
he was still. There's no way I would believe a guy in fucking eyeshadow was that badass.
Wait, before or after he poured gold on somebody else? Really, I'm sorry. I don't care who you are. You can be fucking Mary Jane in flip-flops, but you pour gold on someone, I'm going to think you're a badass. But no, seriously.
I'm sorry. The badass is making someone eat a horse's heart.
Oh, yeah, that's right. But I think, again, it's one of those things where it seems like such a small thing, but for Game of Thrones, it's so huge because they have this entire world.
Well, this the thing was,
and in China,
people are talking, and there's a translator for that person.
Exactly.
in every one of these areas.
One dialect. There
Correct.
were all these different dialects.
There's
And so it's
gigantic land.
Yeah.
why is it that all of a sudden people are talking in this mud English? And I think the big thing, and that's why there's a show on the CW. I don't know if you guys have seen it. I personally like it. It's called Jane the Virgin. It's a silly, lighthearted, funny show. But what's great about the show is one of the characters does not speak English. She speaks Spanish the entire time. Every time there's subtitles. But she's so perfect because everyone else around her is speaking English. But it's really what gives the show this authentic family feeling. It's because her family comes together and they speak English, but she's speaking Spanish, and that communication is a very real thing for the show.
Correct.
I don't understand how Kubla Khan would ever speak English.
Why would he?
What
If he could?
world does Kubla Khan speak English in?
Never.
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 Why would you have such
Never.
a iconic
Thank you.
person
Thank you.
speak something?
It will be so foreign to him.
Oh,
It's
by
like
the way-
asking Marie Antoinette to speak English.
By the way-
no, she never did it. She spoke French.
Here's another thing. Kubla Khan is constantly on the throne.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's like they can't get him off the throne because they're afraid. They're trying to say it's like this is the overall problem to me is Netflix on a corporate level checks all the boxes with Marco Polo. It's got nudity,
Yep.
it's got violence,
Yep.
it's set in a different time period. Everybody's got British accents. There's a literal throne room where somebody's sitting on it, and there's a lot of politics about the throne. But it's just everything else that actually made Game of Thrones interesting and important, they completely ignored because they figured, well, we got all the other things that Game of Thrones is. We're done. We win. You know?
It really did seem like they missed the detail that you see in Game of Thrones, and they missed
just care. There's a lack of what I consider deep concern about telling a story. They're not telling a story.
There's no story.
It's just a collection of scenes.
Yeah.
So, as you guys can see, we all believe that Game of Thrones is still superior to Marco Polo. Marco Polo had the ability to measure up, but they fell down in a lot of different areas. And hopefully, there's someone else somewhere else can make something similar that could probably measure up. But until then, Game of Thrones, we have 4 more months before the next one?
I don't know.
April.
Yeah. I mean, we'll definitely be watching the next season.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna force myself to break through all of these seasons, and I think we should watch the entire season and do another review. I know you guys are super excited about it. We're gonna do it. And if we do, and if it's really bad, we'll just drink our way.
I think I have to do my hair that night, but I'll
But my whole point is, I hope they do better. I love Netflix. I think that they're a group of people that have done some fantastic things in TV.
Change the market.
House of Cards is a perfect example of their ability to pull something like this off.
Correct.
I just think that they got lost, and I think that they, this is not something that they specialize in, making these big kind of costing, time worn dramas. They didn't have a good way to control it. So here's hoping that in the end that they are able to pull this into something that's not a bunch of garbage. But for the moment, it's way too aimless and stupid.
Yep.
Well, we hope you guys enjoyed our little conversation about Marco Polo versus Game of Thrones. Go ahead and leave us your comments. Tell us what you thought about it. And remember, subscribe, like, share. See you next time.